and welcome back to our channel, to Himalayan Hipsters. I'm your host, Saika.
And I'm your host, Astha.
Last week, you heard from our very first and special guest, Emily, a practicing therapist. She guided us on how to have healthy conversation and how mental health and self-care is so important to live a meaningful life. This episode, we will be talking about self-care, what is self-care, why self-care is so important, and what simple steps you can do to start your own self-care routine.
Yep. Self-care is one of, if not the most important, it is one of the most important things you have to do or you can do for yourself. Because when you take care of yourself and build a relationship with yourself, that's when you are able to fully be present in the world for anybody else that might need you. So today we are talking about self-care, and I'm so glad to be here to talk about self-care with you all, because this is a journey that I've been trying to go on myself. And self-care isn't always easy. For some reason, taking care of yourself is so much harder than taking care of people around you, or even your pets, even your plants. You know, we take care of so many things around us. We take care of people, we take care of plants, we take care of our things, but we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. And that is why we're here today to start the conversation about self-care.
Yes. So let's go, Asta, we did our research about self-care and, what is definition of self-care? We are hearing more and more about self-care these days, especially when pandemic hit.
Thank you. Yes, pandemic. We forget that the world has been so crazy, and we are so conditioned to just go, 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 go. So many things happen around us, and we are always telling ourselves, but the show must go on, which is a really good thing to do. But at the same time, we must be aware of how everything around us is affecting us. And the only way to do that is making that time for yourself and making that relationship with yourself to check in on yourself. So what is self-care? Saika did a bunch of research, and we have found the definition, the World Health Organization's definition, for self-care.
Yes. So when we were digging in deep, the World Health Organization in 1998 really defined that self-care is what people do for themselves to establish and maintain health and to prevent and deal with illness. It is a broad concept encompassing hygiene, nutrition, lifestyle, quality of food, environmental factors, socioeconomic factors, and self-medication, right? So Asta, how do you define self-care on your own terms?
Self-care for me, honestly, it means checking in on myself, taking care of myself every day, setting that time out every day to make sure I know how I'm feeling, because I'm sure you can relate to this as well. But a lot of times you really don't know how you're feeling, because there's just so much we have to achieve in a day. We have so many goals we set in our lives, and we just go from one thing to the next, and never looking back and never stopping to think, how am I feeling? How am I doing? Am I mentally healthy right now? What are my emotions right now? All of those things. And that's just, honestly, that's just checking yourself. Self-care comes after knowing how you're feeling, so that whole process of checking in on yourself, making that relationship with yourself, setting out time for yourself every day to check in on yourself, take care of yourself. And self-care could be different for different people, like Emily said in our last episode. So honestly, for me, when I think about self-care, I like to journal so that I can write down my thoughts. I like to pick out things that I'm grateful for in a day. I like to have tea. Another thing I do for my own self-care is to center my thoughts. I close my eyes and I just stay aware in my body and my breathing, and just take the moment to look at the clouds, to look at the trees, to hear the sounds of the birds, to hear the sound of the wind, that moment to just be in my body and just be present. For me, that's one of the biggest things I do for self-care. And I do that, quite often in a day. If I'm ever feeling stressed, I just stop everything and I be present. I listen to the sounds. I look at the clouds, and that really helps me come back to myself and come back to being grounded in myself. So those are the things I do for self-care. So Saika, what about you? What does self-care look like for you, and how would you define self-care for yourself?
Well, self-care for me is self-love. For me, self-care is more about taking care of your mental health, about your physical health, taking care of your emotional health. That is self-care. But self-love means really loving yourself, because when you love yourself and you understand yourself, you're able to take care of yourself too.
Exactly.
So I feel like, you're more attentive about yourself, and you are more in that process, in that frame of mind, when you are really loving who you are and understanding who you are, really, respecting who you are. I feel self-care, it becomes part of the process.
Right.
So that's what self-care really means for me.
I remember Emily had said that when she meets her clients for the first time, one of the first questions she asks her clients is about their self-care and what they do for their self-care. And she mentioned that sometimes a lot of people actually don't know. They don't even have a planned routine for themselves. And, that really made me think about this, is that we put so much attention to detail when it comes to other things in life. For our work, you would never miss a meeting with your boss if it was pre-scheduled, unless there's, some emergency. When you make plans with your friends, you show up. And when you have to, take care of your plants and water them, you show up. But when it comes to showing up for ourselves, we always tend to make excuses, oh, like I didn't have time today, or I am so busy today. And the fact that you have time for everything else in the world except for you, really shows how much self-care is really needed in our current times, like even taking that 5 minutes out in a day for yourself is so important, and committing to it, making an appointment in yourself, setting that goal, setting that alarm, and just showing up for yourself, even if it's just 5 minutes or 15 minutes a day, can make such a big difference in how you feel and how you function in the world.
I absolutely 100% agree. As you mentioned, when we are watering the plants, we are taking care of the plants. We make that priority. We make priority for our work. We make priority for our friends. But when it comes to ourselves, I feel we tend to lose that priority in this busy times and busy schedules and the world of really fast-paced environment. I believe that we miss the factor of really taking care of ourselves.
Right. Prioritizing your own self. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, we talk about self-care a lot. And the thing is that I'm not good at it either. There are many, many days where I miss to take care of myself, making that excuse of I didn't have time, And I'm sure you, actually you don't, Saika. Ever since I've known you, you always, even if it's 5 minutes, you take that time to meditate and you take that time to run. And that's something I'm really trying to get better at sometimes. And because I do a lot of creative projects, it's like I'm in the zone, I'm in the flow, and I don't want anything to stop it. So sometimes I just work for hours, and I know in my head that I have to take even that 5 minutes for myself to really recalibrate myself. But I prioritize everything else before I prioritize myself. And that's something I'm working on too. It's not easy.
And to add to that, I feel self-care for me, or self-love, this routine that I have for myself, it has been very recent that I have committed to the system that I have built for myself with the knowledge of self-love. That is my biggest drive. Astha, I didn't always have the system that I have right now. It's been a very long and learning
trial
process
and errors
for me.
Trial
and errors. This point in my life, this frame of mind that I have right now in self-care, into fitness, really eating healthy food, I have realized that if I am going to prioritize myself, and that I should prioritize myself, and that becomes part of self-care routine. And it has taken more than 3 decades for me to understand what self-care is and really follow the routine.
Yeah, it's the journey you take with yourself. I feel the same way. Although my self-care routines aren't as consistent as yours, Saika, I have been working on this for a very, very long time too.
Right.
I didn't come from a stable home. I didn't come from a family that set routines for me. Like, I had to do that all on my own, especially after leaving home and trying to find my own place in the world. It took a very long time for me to find the things that really work for me. I've experimented with everything. There was a time when I would wake up and do yoga, or wake up and work out, or meditate, or do all of those. And then I really got into journaling every day to start documenting my habits, to start writing down my thoughts and feelings, to understand myself. It took years and years to finally understand myself enough to know what really works for me, or what I really need. You know, I started out not even knowing how I'm feeling. I have suppressed my emotions for so long in my life that there were years in my life I had no idea how I was even feeling.
Wow.
And in that journey, I noticed that there's this thing that we all do. It's this all or nothing mentality that I did many, many times, where I would have a routine for my self-care. Mm-hmm. And then let's say, for example, the routine starts with waking up, drinking a hot lemon tea, and then, going for a run, and then stretching and meditating and taking a shower, let's say, right? So if that's my self-care routine, first of all, that's a lot. And that was one of the mistakes I made, was that even when I was trying to do my self-care routine, I was using it as a way to be productive. I was always like, I have to be doing something good. I have to be productive.
It's like
exactly.
Checklist. It's like taking care of the checklist.
And that was the first mistake I made, is that when you are making a self-care routine, don't worry about being perfect. Don't worry about being productive. This is the time for you to really rejuvenate and take the time to love yourself, not to compete with the world, or not to be better than who you were before. Like, I was always with this, like, I have to be better than yesterday. I have to be better. I have to grow. I have to be productive. Yeah. And I kind of brought that to my self-care routine, and no wonder I was failing, because that's, first of all, a lot of things to do and a lot of pressure on myself.
Right.
And what happened was, if I didn't do one of those things, so let's say, like, in that routine, if I didn't go for a run, I would feel like, okay, well, I've already failed today. I already missed my self-care routine, so I'm not going to do it at all. And that's one of the biggest mistakes. Another mistake that I made was that all or nothing mentality. Self-care doesn't have to be this 3-hour routine. And like Emily said last episode, it could just be that cup of tea with reading a book, or like closing your eyes for 2 minutes and breathing. It could be anything. It could be the smallest things, but these tiny little things matter a lot. And finally, after years and years of trial and errors, just like you, Saika, I have come to that realization too. And I'm so glad we are talking about self-care today, because I feel like it's such an important thing that we all need.
It is. I agree. And it is very, very important. I have to take it back to what you've mentioned about all or nothing. My friends call me either I am all in or all out. I felt that I was being really hard on myself at points, or because I did not understand. I loved the idea of fitness, of how I looked, and how my influencers that I followed, their lifestyle. And right now in wellness, there is so much, like, big industry that is focused on just how we look and how we should feel. And that always impacted me. I loved the idea of how I looked, and fitness was something that I always pushed, because I like to feel good, even though there was a great outcome of feeling amazing. I always had to push myself, and it was all or nothing. So I had like these 3 months of a heavy routine of going all in, and then after I reached my goal weight, or after I felt, good, and I saw in the mirror, I was very content with how I looked in the mirror, I got my confidence back. Then I again went back to the same old routine. So that always happened to me. And I never understood what being consistent means. So going back to loving myself, right? When I said, it was all or nothing before. And now it is like, I make the time, Astha.
Yeah.
I really do make the time. I understand now, if I work out internally for my gut, for my inner health, for my brain, this is going to help my body be more younger, you more rejuvenated, you feel more energy. With that mindset and with that frame of mind that I have right now, I feel that I need to do this. It's not that I'm seeing an influencer or if I'm seeing, I want to be that person.
No.
It's not about that anymore. It's all about for me. It's for my body. It's for my physical, emotional, and mental health.
Thanks for bringing that up. A lot of times we tend to kind of connect this whole self-care idea to what we see on social media. Like, it's still competitive. It's still trying to be productive, right? It's still like, I want this body, so I'm going to consider this workout a self-care. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, if you're doing something because you think you're not good enough, and so you're trying to achieve that, that's really the opposite of what self-care should be. Self-care should be you taking out the time to really connect with yourself, love yourself, accept yourself, do things that rejuvenate you, not burn you out. And that brings me to that point you just made where you had this like big routine of what you wanted to achieve. And then once you've achieved that goal, you would kind of stop and you would be less consistent. And why does that happen? Another mistake of self-care, I guess, is that we set such big goals for ourselves to the point where it's honestly not possible to be consistent every day. So if you set too big of a goal, you can't expect yourself to do that every single day and not burn out. Self-care should be a time to rejuvenate, to connect with yourself, to be rested and to, heal. And like you said earlier, Saika, we see so many social media influencers talk about self-care and then they make it look so glamorous, which is sure, it's great and they're creating content. But we must not mistake these glamorous ideas of self-care and think that that's what we need to do to achieve self-care. Self-care could be anything, right? So a lot of times we see social media influencers like having a really glamorous bath on top of a mountain in Hawaii. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be like that.
It does not.
It's very normal to want something that you see on social media. And one of the biggest effects of social media is we compare, right? We compare either our looks, our bodies, our clothes, our lifestyles, and we also compare our self-care routines to that of others that are creating content. And again, reminding yourself that those are not realistic goals and setting a realistic self-care goal for yourself, knowing and considering your own schedules and finding that thing that you really want to do, not something you're doing because someone else is doing. Finding that one thing that really works for you.
And that is so true, Astha, because I want to go back to the routine, right? I want to go back to that checklist that you mentioned. Before, I used to be hard on myself because it was a checklist, right? Even you mentioned that the self-care before I followed, it was more of following somebody else's schedule. Now, I want to learn. I put that new learning as my self-care too, because I'm building new skills. I meditate so that I am in tune with my body, my mind, and I make sure that I put fitness in so that I'm really feeling better inside, really pushing those natural chemicals or, these serotonins, dopamine, endorphins to really push myself into my self-care routine. If I'm not able to do that the same day, it's okay. I'm not hard on myself anymore. So I just want to bring that point is that before I used to follow
other people's
self-care routine. And you're absolutely right. Self-care is how can you manage your priorities that you have in your life? And it always changes. always changes.
Exactly.
It's never the same.
Exactly. Just like us, we change, we grow, we change our priorities, we change things that we like. And just like that, once something works for you, doesn't mean you have to stick with it forever.
Right.
As you get better at self-care, as you get better at managing your time, as you get better at knowing yourself, you'll change your self-care routine. It evolves as you grow too.
And that's the beauty of growing up as well, maturing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Another thing I would like to, point out is that self-care obviously doesn't have to look the same all the time. You could have different self-care practices, depending upon whether it's a daily practice or a weekly practice or a monthly practice, right? So you could be doing like 5 minutes of book reading a day for self-care, or like 5 minutes of meditation, or 15 minutes of walking outdoors. But then if you look at maybe a weekly goal, it could be something a little bigger, like going for a walk around a lake with a friend. That could also be self-care. That takes a bit longer of a time, so you could only commit to that once a week. And self-care monthly could look like, I don't know, going for a hike at your nearest trail, or like driving to the nearest hill and going for a 5-hour hike. And that's something you can't obviously do daily. So that could be like a monthly or a bi-monthly goal that you have with your friends. So, self-care doesn't have to be static. There's so many things. And what I did to find my version of the perfect self-care for me was brainstorm all of the things that I really liked doing, and that I wasn't doing because someone else was doing. So I really went down to what I love to do and what I love doing. And I, thought about other people in my life that love doing those things. And I started like scheduling or like planning meets or group activities or going on hikes with a friend and stuff like that, so that I was still doing that self-care and doing with someone else. Because you know how when you do things with other people, it's sometimes easier to commit to those things, right?
Accountability.
Maybe going to a paint night with a friend, or going to maybe like a Zumba class. Yeah. That's still self-care, and it's going to be fun. And because you've made that commitment with somebody else, you're more likely to show up.
Yes. And taking back to that, accountability and building that community of self-care, right? So I have been very fortunate that my inner circle of friends really advocate and big proponent of self-care and fitness. Back in 2016 to 2017, we really started to hold ourselves accountable every week. 4 days we used to work out, even for a minimum 30 minutes. We did that for 2 years. We used to message each other and say day 1 completed, day 2. And by the end, that continued for months. I think even more than a year it continued. And we build a routine in our system. So it's really important to have or build that community for yourself. Exactly. And like I said, I was very fortunate enough that my friends and our inner circle is a big proponent of self-care also.
Yeah. Not everybody has that community. For example, I have a lot of friends, but I don't have that like tight community to, text every day and say, hey, did you do your workout? Like, what did you have for breakfast today? Did you eat something healthy? However, you can find online communities and groups that, really challenge you to show up for yourself. For example, Saika herself has an Instagram account called Get Fit with Saika, and she hosts, right? You host monthly or weekly challenges. And her most recent one for March was a self-love challenge. And how many people did you have join you at this one?
I believe it was like 18 or 19 people in the community who did
about
this.
18 to 19 people who joined her in this challenge. And then those people were sending you selfies of them doing these challenges. And that could be like a very helpful way to do this. If you don't have that tight-knit community around you doing it, you can find that community online. Yes. So, there's so many ways to find that group or find the community to keep you accountable and to keep you motivated. Because a lot of times, if you're the only one doing it, the environment you're in might kind of discourage you. If there's no one around you who is in the same path in life, almost, So you got to go out and find those people, whether it's online or, in a global community or on social media, anywhere. But find that group of people who's going to push you.
So true. going back to my March self-love challenge, Asta, it was very simple. Making sure that you do any type of physical activity for 15 minutes, 4 times a week. So when I put this challenge in for March, I saw and read in many wellness articles and studies and this research that was done. If you have a desk job, or if you have a lifestyle that, you know, there is no physical activity or movement, if you do 15 minutes, just 15 minutes or any time of physical activity, like you mentioned earlier about walking, right?
Yeah.
So even if you do that, for just shake your body, like have that momentum movement, you put in that 15 minutes. And that should be enough for your body to produce those hormones for you.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes to showing up for yourself. That's really it.
Yes.
You know, we show up for so many things in life, but we tend to kind of avoid showing up for ourselves.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
So just show up for yourself in whatever way it works for you. Show up for yourself. And I feel like when you start getting consistent at showing up for yourself, you realize how amazing you'll feel, because then you realize, oh my God, I'm showing up for myself. I'm loving myself. A lot of times when you love yourself, that's when you don't really care about what other people think, you know, because you have this feeling of like, I already love myself. I don't need anybody else's validation to be me. And that really starts with self-care and self-love.
That is so true.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, we discussed and we, you know, talked about self-care, and we kind of defined self-care in our own terms, what self-care means to us. And so what is your self-care routine right now? And how do you find the time for yourself?
Yeah. So, currently my, self-care routine isn't always the same. I've actually been really bad at it lately, ever since starting this podcast, because I'm a perfectionist in some ways. So I like really want to make sure I get the little details right. And, I am basically juggling almost 3 jobs right now. So I am a full-time musician. I teach music lessons, and then I do this. And this is really, I'm not really getting paid for this, but like the time commitment is almost like a 3rd job, isn't it? And so ever since I started doing this, I'm having a really hard time making sure to show up for myself. But I still, I play like VR. I do this VR workout. It's called Supernatural. Yeah. And, for me, it's not just a workout. It's a game. So it's very entertaining, and it makes me move. And to be honest, that workout is like really intense. Like it looks fun, but it's so intense. So that's like my escape right now.
Yo, when you showed me the first time when you did the VR, first I was so scared. I didn't even want to put that on the Supernatural VR that you have. And by the way, Supernatural really featured you and showed your videos too. Yeah. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When you came to Boston for our shoot for Himalayan Hipsters, I remember I was like, you got to see this, Saika, you got to see this. You're like, no, I'm scared. And you didn't even try on the workout because it was like, 2 a.m. But then I put it on, but I'm sure you noticed as soon as I put it on, I was tired. It was 2 a.m. But then it really makes you move no matter what. And so that has been a part of my self-care routine now, where I just like put on the headset, and even if there's like this, you can select how long you want to be in there, but there's levels, and there's the music you can choose, and then you can pick your time. So some of these workouts are like 15 minutes, and they also have meditations and like stretches, yogas and stuff. And so now, to really push myself, that's what I do, because it's so entertaining. It's like a little bit of everything for me. So that's one of the things I do for self-care. Another thing is I love my teas. If I'm really trying to take a moment, I listen to a little book. And I drink tea. Sometimes I just want to relax. I sit down, I watch an episode on Netflix of something. I watch other TED Talks or other YouTube channels, or maybe podcasts like these you know, to listen to other people's conversations, learning is also a part of self-care, you know, bettering yourself. You know, if there's things that you have questions about and you really want answers, you know, learning and listening to other people's conversations to kind of Entertainment is also self-care, to be entertained. Another thing that I love doing is also going for walks. Like sometimes if I am in this headspace, especially as a creative, and you hit that block, that writer's block, you don't know what to do next. I tend to just like put on my walking shoes and just go for a walk, and just getting that fresh air and walking and seeing the clouds really refreshes me. Even if it's like a 5-minute walk, it helps me so much. And I mean, I have a lot of different things that I do for self-care. I guess, stopping for 5 seconds or even 5 minutes to like close my eyes, breathe. That really helps me like recenter. I have this thing called Feet Up where you can like hang upside down. You've seen that.
I have.
Yeah. And just like going upside down. I know it's so weird, but I don't know. Just for me, just hanging upside down for a couple seconds, like really feels good. So I have my own weird ways of self-care. What about,
but the thing is like, okay, you just said something. You said that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
That is self-care.
Yeah.
That is so self-care, because all the things that you said and you are doing it right now in your routine, you have it in your routine, is what you really have fun or what you love, right?
I love hot showers. Like I love,
that's part of self-care.
Like hot showers, like face masks. And sometimes after you take a shower, sometimes I like to take like almond oil and make sure like I massage my entire body. And that obviously I don't do every day. I don't have time for it. But if I have the time and I think, ooh, like I have 10 minutes extra this evening, what do? I'll like take a shower and I'll like oil my body and make sure that like all my muscles are feeling good. I do yoga. I belly dance. I sometimes sing. I listen to music. Sometimes I light an incense. I listen to music and I just dance alone in my living room. And that's like, it makes me feel so good. And that's, I guess that comes into the whole movement thing. Like if you don't want to work out, you could literally blast your favorite song and just dance all by yourself. That really helps too. I just want to mention one more thing. I have, and this, Saika, you have seen this too. I have so many gears and equipments for massage. Like I have so many, like massage. I have a foot massager, I have a shoulder massager, I have a massage chair. I have these little lacrosse balls that I roll my feet on.
Yes.
I have a foam roller. I have foot wakers. I've noticed that because my life is so hectic, I need the help of other things. And I bring these things into my life so that I'm like working on something. I have my feet and my foot massager. So and again, this has been a process. Like I didn't start out like this. Years and years, trial and errors, and thinking what I need, what I could do. There was a time in my life where I was like, I really need to go to the masseuse. It's expensive. It takes so much time. So I invested in like a foot massager. I also invested in my self-care. Like if, I was like, I would rather buy these things that help me rejuvenate than buy a really expensive dress. So self-care, is a lot of times people go shopping for self-care, right? Which is fine. But I don't want people to think that you have to spend a lot of money and buy beautiful things as self-care. Self-care could be anything. You don't need to spend money for it. What about you? What about you, Saika? What are you currently doing for self-care?
Well, before I go for me, I want to kind of piggyback on what you mentioned about investing in yourself, how you invested in yourself. And when you realize what makes you feel good, you really do invest the time and the effort of understanding what you love, and you actually do it. Right. And I absolutely agree with all those terms, how you define self-care, about listening to music, about just taking a hot shower. And remember when we talked to Emily, it can be simple as just drinking a warm cup of tea, taking that 5 minutes breathing time, prioritizing that moment of the day just for yourself. It just can be as simple as that. Or even eating your favorite food, not feeling guilty about it.
Exactly.
That can be self-care as well.
The thing is, thank you for
everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation. Thanks
right?
for bringing that up, because a lot of times these days, if you have, let's say you are going somewhere and you show up early and you have extra 5 minutes, what do you usually do when you have extra 5 minutes? A lot of times we just like pull out Instagram, social media, or like we just go on Facebook or get involved, like watch the news, but anytime you have that extra 5 minutes or extra 10 minutes, sometimes I stop and think, okay, maybe there's something I can do for self-care. Maybe I could close my eyes and breathe a little bit, or maybe I could just look at the clouds and feel relaxed. Maybe I could have a cup of tea in that extra 5 minutes. And like I said earlier, like maybe I could oil my feet because they're tired. So anytime you find yourself with some extra time and you think, oh, I'm just gonna like mindlessly scroll on Instagram, we forget to realize that those are the little blocks of times in a day we can actually do things that help us and make us feel better. And you will find so many of these blocks in your days that you could use for self-care. Because, a lot of times, like, I think time is a big issue for when we ask people about self-care, they're like, oh, I don't have time. But again, it could be 2 minutes of something you do to make yourself feel better. It could be 5 minutes of something you do to make yourself feel better. But yeah, Saika, what about you? What's your self-care looking like these days?
Yeah. So my self-care routine for now has been consistent for the past 4 or 5 months now. Currently, my self-care is just my morning routine, making sure I meditate, making sure I journal, making sure I learn a new language, and also put in 4 days a week into fitness for my body, for my mental health, and for my emotional health, and really focus on my evening routine as well, making sure I floss, making sure I brush my teeth before I go to bed, making sure my skin, I remove everything from my skincare routine. So those are all part of my self-care every single day. So that's part of my self-care routine, and I have been following this schedule. I read somewhere once that we have the full power of our life in the morning and evening. In between, there's nothing really we can do to change anything.
Yes.
Right? Because there's so much anomalies that can happen. So many environments can shift our mood, our time, all the plans that we've done, the structure we have planned, or, we go in thinking, oh, I'm going to have this day. However, by the end of the day, things can completely change. However, we have a full control of our morning and our evening, what happens in our morning and what happens in the evening.
That's a good point.
So I really emphasized my routines in the morning, making sure it sounds like a checklist, what I'm saying. But when I have said, like, I meditate, I stretch, I really stretch for my body. I thank my body in the morning. I thank my gut in the morning, So yes, so morning routine and evening routine, all of those things that I mentioned is really part of my self-care for now. Now, like I said, for now, because it might change tomorrow with time, right?
It changes as we change.
And podcast is also part of my self-care, by
exactly.
the way.
Getting more knowledge, listening to conversations. That's a really good point. There are so many events in a day that you cannot control. There's so many things that's going to happen in a day that you cannot control. You can't even predict. But the things that you can control are things like these, like self-care, taking care of yourself, like your own actions. And the reason self-care is important is because you can use that time that you have control over to make yourself feel better.
Right. And Astha, I have to tell you, when I went on this journey, when I went in saying that I want to have my morning routine, I want to have my evening routine, because I want to do this for myself and nobody else, I was kind of hesitant. How I was hesitant is, will I be consistent? Or will I fall off again? Because I have a tendency to, work out and be fit for 6 months and then again lose that routine and then gain all weight again, follow certain routines. So I always felt, oh, maybe I will do that again. That, that doubt within myself. Even when I started this routine for myself, I had this doubt because of all my past experiences. And this time, to be honest, when I understood, when I said I love myself, and many, many times in this episode, I keep mentioning it, now I don't have to force myself. That literally has become my routine. So, it's going to change tomorrow, which is fine. I'm not going to be hard on myself. But when I understood that this is from me, this time is mine.
It sounds like before, when you were doing those things, you had a goal of either like looking better or being fit or losing weight.
Yes.
But now it's not about those goals. It's like you love yourself and you want your body to be healthy.
Yes.
You want your mind to be healthy. So now your goals have changed.
Yes.
Before, your self-care routine was more like trying to be productive, trying to reach a goal. Now your self-care routine is about
weight
self-love.
in the machine.
Weight, exactly. The number. Yeah, on the scale.
The number. It was, the number on the scale, Astha. Like, seriously, that was my end goal. But
now it's your goal is your self-love. It's not even a goal. You're doing it because you love yourself. And I think that's really, that's a really important point to point out over here is like, make sure. And again, we all do this. I've done that too, to be honest, I've done that too. And we all do it. And I guess the biggest takeaway here is that make sure that your self-care routine, you're not doing those things to compare yourself to the standards. Make sure you're doing that just out of love for yourself.
When you mentioned so right now, I have completely taken the weight off. Before, every morning I used to wake up, I used to check my weight in the scale. Because that was one thing. Even though I was into strength training, I know that my muscles weigh more than fats, right? That is a proven fact. So every time I weighed myself every single morning, it was toxic because my mindset was not going into, I feel good or, this is for me. It was saying, how much weight did I lose? Because when you go in Google saying, I'm 5'1", and what is my ideal weight?
Yes.
Right? And when you go in, you have a number given to you and you want to be in that standard. That was my mentality before. And now, no longer. Because now I have taken the weight scale and hidden in one of the closets, and I do check in once a month just to see what I'm doing or how I'm doing physically. But now I don't even see the weight scale anymore. And I have to give kudos to myself for doing
this
that.
Brings me to think that looks like one of our future episodes is going to have to be about body positivity and body shaming in our culture and the standards and norms we set for ourselves and our bodies. In fact, we have a few of our viewers and listeners who have messaged us about this topic. So definitely we're going to talk about the body issues in one of our future episodes. If you've been listening until now, we are so appreciative of you joining us here on our journey as we talk about self-care today and many more topics in the future. If you like these conversations, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you are listening to this on other podcast streaming platforms, please don't forget to follow and hit that bell so you can get notified when we have new content. Okay, so moving on, as we talk about self-care, I want to emphasize the fact that self-care is for everyone. I don't know if you've noticed this, Saika, but a lot of times it's usually the girls that talk about self-care, right? Men, we live in a society where men are taught to be masculine and strong, and words like self-care and self-love aren't heavily used when it comes to talking about men in our society. So I think we need to talk about the fact that everyone should have a self-care routine, even the fellas, everyone should have a self-care routine. Do not be shy of loving yourself. no matter who you are in the world.
That is so true, Astha. That is so true. And like you mentioned, it is for this self-care. It's about physical body, mental body, and emotional health of ourself. And this goes for everyone, for every, gender that we have. Self-care means that, like when I think about what guys think about self-care is always like, I have to go to the gym, building muscles.
Yeah, exactly. And is that really self-care though? I think they're doing that just to be manly. It's like something that they do to compare their bodies to others, right? So that's exactly. Thanks for bringing that. When men talk about self-care, they're like, oh yeah, I got to go to gym. I got to get muscular. No, but like self-care is so much more than just building muscles.
That is so true. That is so true.
And I've asked a lot of my male friends actually what they do for self-care. A lot of times they don't do anything.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of times they don't do anything. And the ones, my friends that do things like, work out and go to the gym, that is not for self-care. It's for like looking good,
right?
And I mean, obviously everyone does that, but just like setting out things that you do. And setting up time for yourself to just focus on self-care. And you might be asking like, what are some things that you can do for self-care? And if you don't even know where to start, like obviously we can give you suggestions, but just go out and brainstorm things that you like doing, things that you love feeling, and if you don't even know what you like, and if you don't even know how you're feeling, that's a great place to start. Knowing yourself, setting out time to ask yourself, what are the things that I actually love? What are the things that I actually like doing? What are activities that I enjoy? And that kind of gives you an answer to what your self-care routine could look like. A lot of times we don't know how we're feeling. Self-care could be getting a therapist appointment. That is definitely self-care. If you don't even know how you're feeling and things you enjoy, maybe a therapist could help you out. Like there's so many things you could do for self-care. And I just want to point out that when you take care of yourself and you love yourself, you could have a better relationship with other people.
Wow.
That's like honestly the starting point. If you don't love yourself, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to know how to love other people and take care of other people.
And that's what exactly I was going to kind of bring the point to as well, is that when you said know yourself, know thyself, right?
Yeah.
When I did this research, Astha, I found out that when the self-care starts, it grows in the community. It even has gone to policies in the government and countries. And this International Self-Care Foundation, they have this, they have this foundation, and it really focuses on, the health, wellness, and well-being. And when I went to their page, I really saw that there are reforms, there are policies, there are community being built around self-care. Because when you are able to take care of yourself, when you understand yourself and love yourself and, really love what you do, for yourself, I feel like you can build that community, and you can share that community, making sure that they prioritize, or in the community, you prioritize your community to feel better as well.
International Self-Care Foundation, ISF. This is an actual thing out there. So even in your own time, you can definitely do your own research or Google tips and tricks for your own self-care, and maybe find things that work for you and experiment with those things and see how you feel. We would love to know, by the way, if you enjoy this content, and even if you have started your own self-care journey, we would love to hear about it. So please don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know about your self-care routines and any other comments you might have or feedback you might have for us. We would love to hear from you.
Yes, we would definitely love to hear from you.
Saika, as we are talking about self-care, it really brings us to this. It's about choosing, right? At the end of the day, you have to choose yourself. You have to prioritize yourself. You have to choose to do things that make you feel better. It's all about the power of choice. And the power of choice could be so many more things, you know? You have control over your life, and you have control over the decisions and the choices you make in life that can have lasting effects in your life and actually in the lives of people around you.
Yes, you're so right. The power of choice. When you make the decision, just knowing for yourself, or making the choice to act on it, making the choice to not act on it, and that all becomes power of choice, which brings us to our next episode.
Yes.
Power of choice.
Yes. Don't forget to tune in next Sunday, because we will be releasing the next episode where we have a conversation on the power of choice. Thank you so much once again for listening to us. We are Himalayan Hipsters, and we cannot wait to bring more amazing conversations to you. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, and hit the bell so you get notified when we have new content. That's all for today. We will see you next week with a new episode. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. We are Himalayan Hipsters.